Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is my indeed pleasure to make some introductions here that would literally, if I matched with my fondness of who I'm about to present to you, would take up half of their speaking time. So I will shorten that and go right into introducing you to who I would call one of the nation's leading knowledge experts on opportunity zones. Yes, if you've been taking notes, and if you haven't, see my blank sheet, I'm about to take notes because I asked you and implore you to do the same. Mary Burke Baker is the Government Affairs Counselor in Washington, D.C., where she leads the tax policy process and practice. Mary's focus on federal tax matters affecting businesses, including domestic and multinational corporations and all types of pass-through entities and individuals. Her practice covers tax policy, tax reform, regulatory and guidance, tax administration, technical tax issues with particular emphasis on corporate and pass-through issues, accounting methods, information reporting, reports on foreign banks and financial accounts, compliance, and emerging cryptocurrency issues. Since enactment of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, better known as the Opportunity Zones, in December of 2017, Mary, who has worked extremely closely with the Treasury Department, the Senate, and Congress in delivering what we now have is what, and I define as is publicly defined as $100 billion economic stimulus program for America, has particularly focused on this program and is a frequent speaker around the country. And we are happy to have Mary lead our conversation on equity, access, and inclusion, STEM, and opportunity zones initiatives. Get your pen and paper, pad. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Mary Burke Baker.
And thanks, Keith, and good morning, everybody. And congratulations, Keith, on this pulling together this very important summit on a very important topic called opportunity zones. And as you'll be able to tell as I'm talking, I probably get more enthused about opportunity zones than a person has a right to, but I do believe that it is a very powerful tax incentive that can bring real change to our country. So we thought it would be smart as a beginning, if you don't understand exactly what in the world are opportunity zones and how do they work and what's the big tax benefit, it would be helpful to have some context for that. So that's what I'm going to provide this morning. Is I'm just going to go over what I call the ABCs of opportunity zones, or the ABCs of Oz, which will provide you some very basic background information about what the tax incentive is and what some of the basic rules are, so you can kind of get your head around all of these great conversations that are going to occur over the next couple of days. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of what the opportunity zone tax incentive can be used for, as the bubbles say, the Oz incentive, almost any type of real estate project can qualify for Oz benefits, and virtually any type of for-profit business can qualify for the opportunity zone incentive as well. And on the list is not an all-inclusive list by any means. It's just a representative sample of the types of projects and businesses that can qualify for the Oz incentive. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read the entire list, but you can see we have a specific focus today on energy and agriculture. The Oz incentive definitely will work for either of those sectors, but it can also apply for what I call quality of life type of businesses in a neighborhood, which can be anything from a medical clinic to a daycare center to a laundromat to grocery stores, but it's also very much for housing and mixed use and all sorts of real estate and all sorts of businesses, restaurants and manufacturing and anything that you can imagine that's an active trade or business. The opportunity zone incentive can potentially work for it. Next slide, please. So what is the opportunity zone incentive? It is a mechanism to encourage and facilitate private investment in disadvantaged areas. Investors will receive tax benefits for investing in either an operating business or a real estate project that's located in an opportunity zone. And as you might imagine, it is a tax provision, so it is kind of complicated when you get into all of the nits of it, but we won't go into that because I could make your eyes roll into the back of your head really quickly if I went into all the details, but that's why people like me are around to be able to help with the details, but we'll just stay on the high points so that you get the gist of how it works. Next slide. So these are the basic benefits for investors for investing in the Opportunity Zone incentive. First of all, investors need to invest capital gains. It's only capital gains that will qualify for the Opportunity Zone tax benefit. So investors who have capital gains to invest can invest in something called an opportunity fund. And if I'll use a simple example. I have $100 of capital gains. I invest it in an opportunity fund. Normally, I'd have to pay tax on those capital gains in 2020, but because I'm investing in this opportunity fund, I can delay or defer paying the tax on my $100 until tax year 2026. So that's benefit number one. Benefit number two is that I can delay, I can get an increase in my basis for purposes of determining the ultimate tax that I pay. I can get a 10% increase in my basis if I hold on to my investment in the opportunity fund for at least 5 years. So as long as I invest by the end of 2021, I can hold on to it for at least 5 years, because remember, I have to pay tax on the capital gains that I'm originally investing in the fund in 2026. So as long as I invest by the end of 2021, I can get that 10% increase in basis. So that means that my $100 of capital gains, now I only have to pay tax on $90 of it because I get that 10% bump in my basis. So in 2026, I'm only paying tax on $90, not $100. So I get the benefit of the time value of money plus the step up in basis on my original investment. But then the real juice, the third leg of the stool of the Opportunity Zone tax incentive is that if I hold on to my investment in that opportunity fund for at least 10 years, then I don't have to pay any federal income tax on whatever gain I have when I sell my interest in the opportunity fund. So if my $100 that I invest of capital gains in 2020, if I sell in 2030, or I can hold it actually until as long as 2047. I don't have to sell after 10 years, but I can if I want to. So if my $100 turns into $1,000, I don't have to pay tax on that $900 of gain. If it turns into $100,000, if it turns into $1 million, if it turns into a really unicorn type of business and it's worth $1 gazillion when I sell it, I don't have to pay any federal tax on those capital gains. And there's no cap, there's no allocation like the New Markets Tax Credit or some of the other incentives that are out there. It's just whatever the gain is for federal tax purposes, I don't have to pay tax on it. Some of the states are complying with that, some of them are not. So you have to check the state where the Opportunity Zone incentive is located, or Opportunity Zone is located, to determine what the state treatment would be. But for federal purposes, that can be quite a windfall. Next slide, please. So I know that a lot of folks that are on the meeting today are from federal agencies. So it's really important to be able to talk about where do you fit into this? Where does the federal government fit into this? Where do the state and local governments fit into this as well? The Opportunity Zone incentive obviously can decrease the cost of capital for entrepreneurs and developers because maybe people won't be so demand quite such a high return on investment because they're getting all these tax benefits. And these types of investments appeal to folks that are ESG, economic, environmental, social, and governance type of investors, impact investors, so they may not demand quite as high of a return on investment. And it can definitely incentivize investments in areas that might be overlooked, including disaster areas. Importantly, it can be twinned or tripled or quadrupled. It can be matched with other federal, state, and local tax incentives. And that can include federal government grants, loans, any other type of federal incentive. A lot of states are providing companion incentives to the Opportunity Zone incentive. And even local municipalities and governments are providing benefits as well. They may be expediting the permit process, or they may be providing some sort of a jobs credit or other types of incentives that, coupled with the IAEOZ incentive, just make a really nice incentive. Next slide, please. So we like to call it that the IAEOZ incentive is kind of a supercharger for other benefits. And some other things in the tax code, there's a special section in the tax code called Section 1202, which deals with small businesses, where small businesses that meet a certain definition, if they sell after 5 years, don't have to recognize capital gains. And it's kind of a workaround of that 10-year hold rule of the Opportunity Zone incentive, that perhaps you could take advantage of the Section 1202 incentive if you don't want to hold on to it for 10 years. Now, you're not going to get the tax-free treatment, but for some reason you need liquidity or you want to get out of an investment, that is a possible workaround or companion to the IAEOZ incentive. You're all familiar, if you're working for the federal government right now, and I spent 27 years working at the IRS, so I understand a little bit, I think, about how the federal government works, and then 6 years on Capitol Hill on the Senate Finance Committee with the Work Council, the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, which is spread across many, many executive branch agencies to try to, as I call it, cut the red tape of opportunity zones, so that if there are other federal grants or loans that could possibly be paired with the Opportunity Zone incentive, that's just adding to the financing of the project or the business to make it easier for it to launch and easier, it gives it kind of a leg up to succeed. So I am familiar with the big matrix. I think there's 180, 200 programs, loans, and grants and different incentives that have been identified, where all of you have been working hard to try to figure out how to cut the red tape to make it easier to qualify for the IAEOZ incentive and some of these other federal incentives. And similarly then for state and local governments as well. I might also add, looking at the very last bullet, that in addition to partnering with governmental agencies, tax exempts, foundations, private foundations, for example, educational organizations and community partners, including the faith community, are all very important stakeholders in pulling together an IAEOZ project or an IAEOZ business. Next slide, please. Since today's focus is particularly on agriculture and energy, and when I first met Keith, one of the things that we bonded on immediately was that I grew up on a farm, and it wasn't one of these big corporate farms, it was a small family farm. So I grew up working hard and doing some kind of nasty jobs. We had livestock as well as cash crops, and so I really can identify with trying to do something for the agricultural sector. And the Opportunity Zone is a very good fit for farming. It can help pay for buildings and equipment and to try to keep those farms going. For the energy sector, we have at the firm, we have several clients that we have worked on in the energy sector. We have a big energy deal practice. And so we've seen a lot of interest, wind and solar panels, all of those types of projects. You can use the Opportunity Zone incentive for a lot, particularly renewables, but it's not limited to renewables, but that's been what we've seen as the focus of the clients that we're working with on the IAEOZ incentive. It's really important to note that IAEOZ is not just something for urban areas. While the urban projects have receive more attention and probably more criticism, because I'm sure you're aware that there are critics of the Oz incentive that think it's just some sort of a scheme for wealthy people to make more money. In my opinion, kind of overlooking the fact that wealthy people have money to invest, and they want a return on their investment for investing. But if money is going into opportunity zone areas, then it can be a win-win for everyone. And I'm not going to disparage people who have money who want to invest in opportunity zones as part of their portfolio. But it's important to remember that the Oz incentive, almost not half, but approaching half of the opportunity zones that have been designated by the governors, not by the federal government, but by the governors, are in rural areas. There's over 8,700 opportunity zones scattered around the country, and many, many of those are in rural areas that don't have the chambers of commerce, who don't have the economic development corporations to be out there marketing them and saying, hey, here we are, we're open for business, come invest here. But yet they very much need the opportunity zone incentive dollars and investments in their communities. So I want to drive that home, that Oz is very much intended to benefit rural communities. So the last slide, just driving home, Oz is about creating jobs. It's about building an economic base in a community, and it's also about wealth building, and hopefully not just for people with capital gains, but also for the residents of these communities. Next slide. Some of us are more visual as opposed to lingual, and so it always helps to have a couple of pictures to drive home how the Oz incentive works. So if you follow this slide around, so the capital gains, remember, it has to be capital gains invested in an opportunity fund, going down the left side of the slide. And then the opportunity funds are the investment vehicle that then invests in opportunity zone property. Following the orange around, then the capital gains generally need to be invested within 180 days of the date of the transaction that gives rise to the capital gains. These can be capital gains from individuals, from businesses, any entity that has capital gains. It can even be foreign investors, say a foreign person that is invested in U.S. real property, real estate, and has sold it. They are subject to tax on capital gain, on the gains of that property. So as long as you have a U.S. income tax liability, those capital gains are eligible for the Oz incentive. So following the orange around, individuals and businesses, and then we talked about that the gains, the tax on the capital gains are deferred as late as 12/31/2026. If you sell it, obviously, before 2026, your investment in the fund, you have to pay the tax then, but generally, if you're holding on to it, 2026. You get the 10% increase in basis if you hold on to it for at least 5 years. There was as much as a 15% increase in basis, but you had to invest by the end of 2019. There are efforts on the Hill, and we'll talk about this more in the panel I'm on tomorrow, which I think is at 9:15, kind of a trailer for our next presentation, to delay that, to move that forward so that more people can still get the 15% increase in basis. But right now it's a maximum of 10, and then the gains are tax-free if you hold on to that investment for at least 10 years. So then looking at the blue slides, the opportunity fund, that is either some sort of an investment vehicle. If we can stay back on the slide we were just on just for a minute. The opportunity fund can be either a partnership, it can be a corporation. Most of the ones that we're seeing are formed as LLCs. But the funds, the capital gains, must be invested through the opportunity fund in order to get the Oz benefit. You can't invest directly in a business located in the opportunity zone. Looking at the purple, what is opportunity zone property, which is what the opportunity funds must invest in. Opportunity zone property can either be a direct investment in tangible property like a building or equipment, or it can be an investment in stock or a partnership interest in either a corporation or a partnership that is involved with an opportunity zone project or business. Next slide, please. One more picture. And this was intended to be a funnel, but if you look at it subliminally, it kind of looks like a martini glass with a bunch of olives going in. So I don't know, you can make your own judgment about me, what I was thinking when I made this slide. But this is just another picture of what opportunity funds, how it works. The capital gains must go through the opportunity fund, and then it is the opportunity fund that either has the direct investment in tangible property or in an opportunity zone corporation reflected by the square, or a partnership reflected by the triangle. And again, a non-inclusive list of all the types of businesses that can potentially qualify for the opportunity zone incentive. Next slide. So the players, I think I've covered a lot of these, but just again, this is one of the situations where there's a lot of stakeholders to make this a success. So it takes the investors who have the money. It takes developers, entrepreneurs, farmers, innovators, all sorts of businesses, universities that are looking to partner, do some sort of a public-private partnership to develop student housing, for example, tribes, public sector entities who partner with private investors, foundations. All of these are different stakeholders in the IAEOZ incentive. I work quite a bit with economic development authorities around the country, which can include both urban and rural, who are identifying needs in their areas. They have opportunity zones in their areas, and they're helping to identify the needs and pull together the parties to be able to make this all happen. The fund, this is a fund, and there's record keeping that has to be done with it. There has to be decisions made about investments. So there's a role here for fund sponsors and fund managers. If you just want to do your project, or you want to make the investment but don't want to be bothered with actually managing it from day to day, there will be people who will be happy to do that for you. And again, as I mentioned, communities, local governments, the federal government, business leaders, the faith community, all of these parties can come together to work together to maximize the use and the benefit of the IAEOZ incentive in an area. So put kind of quickly and succinctly, it's people with money, people who need money, and people who can manage the money are all integral parts of the IAEOZ incentive. Next slide, please. So this is sort of there's different ways that you can slice and dice the way that you might arrange an IAEOZ project, but this is kind of a generic, very common type of a model, where you have IAEOZ investors, who are people with capital gains, and they are investing in the opportunity fund, or the QOF, as people call it. And that is reflected by the triangle or the square. It can be a corporation, it can be a partnership, and you can have a sponsor or a manager, fund sponsor, manager that's actually managing the day-to-day. That's what the yellow triangle is. And so that fund then must invest in an opportunity zone business. At least 90% of the fund's assets must be invested in an opportunity zone business. Congress did not want funds to end up being passive investment vehicles to go invest in the stock market. So that's why they put that 90% requirement in there. So non-opportunity zone investors can invest directly into the opportunity zone business. IAEOZ doesn't really change the way you put together a deal. It just adds a few bells and whistles that you have to meet. So you can have both an IAEOZ fund investing in a business, and you can have non-IAEOZ investors in the business as well, that maybe don't have capital gains, but they still think it's a good investment. And then that business then can have either one project or business below it, or it can have multiple projects or businesses below it. These businesses cannot be partnerships, or they can't be corporations. They have to be formed as special purpose vehicles, because there's rules against an opportunity zone business investing in other partnerships and businesses. But an opportunity zone business could potentially own and be operating an unspecified number of real estate projects or businesses within the IAEOZ business structure. Next slide, please. So I have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to just go over some of the more detailed requirements of what it takes to be an opportunity zone property and an opportunity zone business. As I mentioned before, opportunity zone property, which is what the fund must invest in, is either stock in an IAEOZ business, partnership interest, and that can be either a capital or profits interest in an IAEOZ business. And that also includes, there was a question initially whether that included multi-member LLCs, but it does. That's treated as a partnership. Or IAEOZ business property. And so I would encourage you to pay attention to this particular part because you'll hear a lot about what constitutes qualified IAEOZ property. So IAEOZ business property is tangible property that's used in a trade or business of the Opportunity Fund. It must be acquired either by purchase or lease after 12/31/2017. The IAEOZ incentive was enacted into law on December 22nd of 2017 is when President Trump signed it. And so that's where that date comes from. So what Congress didn't want was for me to be owning a property and then just, do some paperwork and shuffle it around. And then all of a sudden I made an IAEOZ investment when I really haven't invested any new money. They wanted new money coming into these projects. So that's why one of the reasons why they have that acquisition date requirement. And then either the original use of the property has to begin in the opportunity zone, like building a new building from the ground up, or the building has to be, or the property has to be substantially improved within 30 months of the date of acquisition. So that would be, for example, if I bought a building and then I wanted to rehab it into affordable housing, I would need to do that within 30 months of the date of acquisition. And the term substantially improved actually has a specific meaning that I have to put as much into the property to improve it as I paid for it, not including the value of land. So if I pay $100 for a property and the land's worth $40, I have $60 into the building. I have to put at least $61 into the building to meet the substantial improvement test. Again, Congress wanted real economic activity and not just passive investments. Next slide, please. So that is what the tangible property is. And an IAEOZ fund can invest directly in tangible property, but to be honest with you, I've never seen one fund that invested directly in tangible property. They're all investing in an opportunity zone business, which remember is either a partnership or a corporation. So in order to be a qualified opportunity zone business, then any tangible property that the business has to be qualified tangible property, which is what we just covered on the last slide, acquired after 2017, original use or substantial improvement. The regulations say only 70% of the tangible property of the business has to meet those requirements. So you could have 30% of the property, the tangible property, be outside the opportunity zone, or maybe you've had it and it was acquired before 2018. So up to 30% of the property can be bad property, kind of good property and bad property, non-qualifying IAEOZ property. But the 70% threshold does apply. Then in addition to that tangible property test, at least 50% of the gross income of the business has to be derived from the active conduct of the trader business in the opportunity zone. So there's 3 safe harbors. If you're paying at least half of your wages for activity taking place in the opportunity zone, if at least half of the hours that are expended are occurring in the opportunity zone, or if the management and control decisions and the tangible property are taking place or located in the opportunity zone, and they are required to at least generate at least 50% of the gross receipts of the business, that also will meet this 50% test. Then you can also do a facts and circumstances test if none of the safe harbors apply. A couple other requirements that are important to qualify as an IAEOZ business: if there's intangible property, at least 40% of the intangible property has to be used in the active conduct of the business. So that could be, patents or trademarks or something like that. Again, as I mentioned, Congress didn't want this to be a passive investment, so there's limits on the amount of financial property. It's called non-qualified financial property that an Oz business can hold. Less than 5% of the assets of the business can be sitting in liquid assets like cash or cash equivalents, or even an investment in a partnership or a corporation. No sin businesses. And so sin businesses are sort of this term that floats around the hill when you're working on legislation that Congress doesn't think that people, taxpayers, would necessarily want to invest their money in. So a liquor store, a casino, a tanning salon, those are considered to be sin businesses. And surprisingly, one of the sin businesses is also, to many people's surprise, a golf course. You cannot use the Oz incentive to invest in a golf course. So people always find that to be interesting. One of the questions that we get is, well, on the list that's in the statute of these sin businesses, cannabis businesses are not on that list. But if liquor stores are, why aren't cannabis stores? Well, the reason for that is that all this list of sin businesses was sort of imported by cross-reference to another code section. And at that point in time, nobody ever dreamed that cannabis businesses would be legal in the states and perhaps eventually on the federal level. So it's just not there. But my personal opinion and advice would be, don't assume you can use Oz dollars to invest in a cannabis business and then find out down the road that didn't work, and then you're not going to get your Oz investments. At the federal level, cannabis businesses are still illegal. So to the idea of a tax benefit to subsidize a cannabis business, it's illegal at the federal level. I don't think Congress intended that. So that's just my personal opinion on how that would work. Secretary Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has also suggested that he does not think that the Oz incentive works for cannabis businesses. Next slide, please. I'm just going to take a couple more minutes to highlight some of these key requirements. I mentioned about the 180 days, and I'm just kind of running down the list of things I haven't covered. Something very important, the related party rules, the third bullet on this slide. Again, Congress wanted new investment, new economic activity. So there is a very strict related party rule test that you cannot have more than 20% continuity of ownership. If you're selling an asset that you want to use in an Oz project located in an opportunity zone, whoever is selling it to you is limited to a 20% ownership interest. So some people have tried to work around the rules and then they realize, oh, there's this 20% test. So that does limit to some extent what you can do, although there's pretty liberal leasing rules that can allow you to work around that in many ways. So the failure, what happens if you don't meet all these rules? Well, initially there will be penalties if, say, the Opportunity Fund fails to invest at least 90% of its assets. There will be penalties. At some point, the IRS would probably say, you didn't ever intend to really have a qualifying fund in the first place, and pull your benefit. But the IRS is not opined on what that will take. So that's all guidance still to be forthcoming. I've covered a lot of material, and I think I've run out my 30 minutes. So I am going to pause here and hand it over to the rest of the panel. But certainly if you have questions about what I've talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me. And certainly if you have a project that you're interested in, reach out to me. We'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
We have a question from Ernesto. Can OZ investments be combined with new market tax credit investments at the QOZB level? Let me read that one more time. You got it.
Yeah, I think I understand the question. Okay. Yes, it can. There's no prohibition against pairing the Oz incentive with new markets tax credit, low-income housing tax credit, or any of these other incentives that are out there. That said, they are not the most elegant fit. You know, in order to qualify for the IAEOZ incentive, you have to meet all of the IAEOZ requirements. In order to qualify for New Markets Tax Credit, you have to meet all of those requirements. Low-income housing tax credit, similar. Practical experience, people that have tried to pair those or twin those have found that it's not that easy to actually meet all the requirements of all of those incentives. So that's actually one of the things that is under consideration to kind of fix the IAEOZ incentive now that it's been out there for a couple of years and everybody's had a chance to kick the tires and figure out where things could be woven together a little bit better to make it easier for projects to launch. And that's one of them, is to try to synchronize some of those requirements for those different incentives so it's easier to use all of them on the same project.
Okay, I think my computer was asleep, and not because it was boring at all, but because I was awake fully. And I have tons of questions and notes. Mary, thank you so much for doing what I knew you were going to do. And you probably left about 3 to 6 months worth of questions in the boardrooms of companies who are here on our audience, and also in agencies who may have not drilled down as deeply as you even in your A to Z presentation this morning. I certainly hope that even in the classrooms, and teachers recognize that there's a couple of things that you said. And actually, let me take back to my notes. It was literally OZs, opportunity zones, qualified opportunity zones, are designed for people with money, those who need money, and those who would like to be a part of managing capital. We hope that our students in classrooms around America have a end game in mind of getting their education, not just to make money, but to make a difference in their community, in areas of whether it's healthcare to, you know, social work and anything and everything above and below and in between. Understanding this type of information is nothing more than a inspiration to want to know more. And so we thank you. Thank you so much for that 30 minutes of, I guess you would call appetizer, with a little bit of, you know, exposure to what's on the menu. Now, tomorrow we'll be hopefully better prepared to get on yet another, what I would call transactional conversation with some developers and those who really understand going beyond the policy and in the actual social impact that could be made. And so we look forward to that. I can't thank you enough. As we move swiftly into our next panelist, who sits beside you, is an example of how federal government agencies could actually align with the OZ incentives so that matching dollars, matching funds, grants, projects such as whether it's a school building, a nonprofit, a foundation, a corporation that's set up, all those kinds of stakeholders that you've just described can have conversations. And I specifically bring to our audience this morning Angela Washington, Senior Business Development Specialist of the Minority Business Development Agency. And Angela is a Senior Business Development Specialist who has years and years and years of experience and has firsthand operation experience, about 20 plus years, I think Angela will get me right on the number, of federal government experience, serving 6 presidential administrations. She's held various program and specialized positions in key government agencies such as the Office of Personnel Management, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce. Angela joined the Minority Business Development Agency in January of 1999 in the Office of the National Director during the Clinton administration. Currently, she is a Senior Business Development Specialist at the MBDA, Office of Business Development, providing management and technical assistance to business domestically and internationally, among other responsibilities. Angela also is the facilitating coordinator between the MOU that was established between just recently this year, 2020, August, of Department of Energy and the Minority Business Development Agency. And she's going to be able to now tie in what she's heard and what you've heard around the Opportunity Zone, but most probably start with telling you what she does at the Minority Business Development Agency and what that agency does. And we are happy to introduce her because she's an advocate and an ambassador for minority businesses, those who should benefit from the information shared today. Angela, good morning.
Thank you, Keith. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming in without feedback and anything?
You are coming in perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. I will certainly send you the check in the mail for that wonderful introduction. I certainly appreciate it. The work in the space of opportunity zones as well as energy. As we have talked on a number of occasions, how we integrate minority businesses into this opportunity zone opportunity right now, while we also look at how we can leverage some of what's happening in the energy and agriculture space. So I'm really excited to be here today. I know we only have a few minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about MBDA, our agency, some of the success we've had, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I feel that the folks on this line can get involved and get engaged with some of the resources. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to be on the panel today. Dr. Baker, it was just a wonderful presentation to hear the level of technical insight being provided to this body. So I'm very grateful for that in-depth level of insight on opportunity zones. Very grateful for that. Again, my name is Angela Washington. I am a Senior Business Development Specialist at the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. If you're not aware, MBDA is one of 12 bureaus within the Department of Commerce. It's one of the most uniquely configured agencies, if you ask me. We have the International Trade Administration dealing a lot with food security in terms of agriculture in a number of areas. We have obviously the census, which we just concluded. We have NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, where we also enjoy a partnership with our Manufacturing Extension Partnership Office, which also has a very nice tie into agriculture, energy, and opportunity zones. We have the Patent and Trademark Office at the Department of Commerce, a number of bureaus that are very much interwoven into our economic growth and our economic activity. So I'm very excited to be a part of the Department of Commerce, but more importantly, the Minority Business Development Agency. As you know, we have a very unique mission in that we are one of the only federal agencies that's solely dedicated to the growth and global competitiveness of minority business enterprises. It's our mission for those businesses to be able to compete globally. We feel that minority business enterprises must be on a continuous journey of transformation, which is why we also see the opportunity zone as a very significant period in time for our minority firms to leverage this economic tool, if you will. If you look at how MBDA has performed over time, we have a national network of MBDA business centers and grant recipients that we provide funding to annually so that they are able to assist the community in developing large-scale programs, helping minority businesses engage in with government, federal government, state, local, private sector, to really fuel growth throughout the minority business community. And that's a mission that we really take to heart. So every industry, there is an element of where we can see greater participation and support for minority firms. We really take that mission serious. If you look at our annual performance last year in capital, MBDA connected entrepreneurs to private lenders, including banks, mutual funds, and investors and we help minority businesses secure over $1.6 billion in capital. And that didn't stop there. We also worked alongside contracts and markets where we were able to help minority firms secure about $3.1 billion in contracts. And if you look at the third leg of our key services, access to markets being the third, we actually helped facilitate over $300 million in export transactions in FY19. And as a bit of a teaser, in FY20, I think we were able to double the number of exports. And I mention that specifically because a large part of that export growth was in the agriculture sector. And we have 5 specialty centers around the country, in addition to our 20-plus MBDA business centers that are located throughout the country, from Arizona to Texas to Washington, D.C., and Georgia, and every other major state, if you will. But in addition to that, we have our export centers in California, Florida, Illinois, Texas. Those centers around the country have partnered with universities, business owners, and put together projects and deals to help them leverage many of the tools and initiatives that you see as it relates to minority communities. Our export centers have really taken a front row seat and helping to educate minority firms on industries and opportunities, specifically the Opportunity Zone as well. We also have a federal procurement center that focuses solely on federal government contracting, engaging with the federal government. We have projects that we have awarded specific funding to in a number of areas. We have in California, we have our Rural Community Assistance Corporation partnership with Asian Inc. We have just a number of partnerships throughout the country that I feel that any business entity or any university could leverage in terms of creating the type of plan, if you will, to approach opportunity zones with support, with clarity, as well as appropriate tools and relationships. So our business center network has been very much engaged in opportunity zone around the country. So depending on your focus of opportunity zones as well as agriculture, there may be some centers that are more situated to help you specifically. Take, for example, Florida. We have our our Miami, MBDA Export Center, which we also have a business center in Florida. But we also know that one of the, and I'm always careful about ranking and saying, speaking on the university, but we know down in Florida, a number of the universities are ranked very well in terms of performance, but specifically in agriculture. So if you look at in Florida, we have a robust, if you will, offering of resources and partnerships to help figure out appropriate projects inside of the Opportunity Zone. So, and that can be replicated throughout the country. We're very excited about putting together that network, if you will, of folks who can support businesses directly. One of the things I wanted to say, when we were doing our research around agriculture and opportunity zones, what we found out is, to Dr. Baker's point, the qualified opportunity zone funds are really great options, especially for agriculture investors. If you look at the opportunity zone funds, in terms of some of the investor tools in agriculture, one of the most significant reasons that this becomes a potential significant opportunity is because we know that many of the opportunity zones are located in rural areas. And because of farmland and timberland, they're generally these are generally designed to be for long-term investment. So just depending on where you are in agriculture and farming, there could be a number of angles to approach investments. It could be your land use investments. It could be investing in technology to, and I could be mistaken in terms of how you actually manage the opportunity zone fund within the agriculture space. But when you look at investments, there are a number of investments in technology that can be made in agriculture. And I want to, as I wrap up my comments, because I know that we're running out of time, and I apologize for speaking so quickly. But going back to what Mr. Moore said in terms of the Department of Energy, why that's such a significant part of the conversation today in terms of agriculture. Well, we already know very specifically that the Department of Energy has a great nexus, if you will, to agriculture. In fact, the MOU that was signed, we have a person in our office now, Kelly Mitchell, who came over from the Department of Energy, helped to put together that MOU. And we're going to be working to look at some of the findings of the working group that came out of the development of that MOU. But we found that there were a number of opportunities for minority farmers to leverage the Department of Energy for some of those much needed resources. And so as I look at doing what Mr. Moore said and triangulating, just listening at the presentation today, I see a great nexus between MBDA, Department of Energy, and Ag, in that when you look at what energy is doing in terms of investing in minority firms and investing in this idea of inclusion, there are about 19 HBCUs in this agriculture space, and there are about 17 DOE federal labs. Connecting with those DOE federal labs and engaging in the agriculture space, it just, to me, is step one. There's a portfolio of IP. There's a technology. When you look at how the Department of Energy has opened up what I like to say one of the government's most vast treasures, being the equities of the national laboratories, DOE has opened up its doors to its laboratories, to its scientists, to its researchers, to its patents, to its facilities. So to help those universities and those companies in the agriculture space, maybe even define and understand what their portfolio should look like, or what type of projects they should be looking to develop, so that they can leverage those other programs like the Opportunity Zone. But I know I said a lot, and I kind of went in a lot of different places. I just wanted to be really, really mindful of the time, but really have you guys just think about MBDA as a resource when you're looking at trying to develop these Opportunity Zone strategies. We can tap back into Mr. Moore and his network of folks, but we have experts around the country that are waiting to support you. We, in fact, at MBDA, during the earlier part of this administration, when the Opportunity Zones came out, we had a 5-city tour where we went around the country, bringing in stakeholders and subject matter experts to talk about the funds, to talk about projects, to put projects together. And we spent a lot of time building and cultivating the network and the ecosystem around resources for Opportunity Zones. So if I could just, and all that I've sort of echoed here today, if I could illuminate the point that there are a number of strategies and a number of ways that you can put together your Opportunity Zone plan in the space of agriculture, leveraging even some of the most unique equities like the Department of Energy, that you would reach back into MBDA, that you go to our website, www.mbda.gov. We had a recent refresh, so there's not a lot of information there, but there is a way to connect to our MBDA business centers so that you can sit down and talk to an advisor, learn about what's happening in terms of projects that may be on the horizon already in the area where you are. So I'm just wanting us to think about this incredible ecosystem of resources and how we actually overlay those to come up with the appropriate strategy, especially based on where you are in agriculture. There's some things in the agriculture space where you can get, maximize incentives, and then there's some other areas where it's not as simple as that. So you need someone to sit down who can go over some of these nuances inside of the program to help you understand where the barriers are and where the challenges may be, but also where some of the opportunities are. So I think I may have taken up a little more of my time, but again, I am so grateful to be here. I hope that all the organizations and the entities on the line are just seeing this here as a glimpse. This is a very challenging topic, and Mr. Moore and company has done a great job of really breaking down that information, bringing in you great subject matter experts, and I would just say certainly follow the instruction to get that pad out, get that pen down, write down a few salient topics that you hear come up, keywords, and start to develop your strategy today. And that is, I guess that's all I'm going to have for I think I'm 6 minutes over.
Angela, thank you so much. And I will, if I'm able to get in, echo, etc. Let me just say that because I've worked now for 18 years, going on, 19 years in the federal government, helping companies, organizations, and clients secure contracts with the government and grants, etc. MBDA was our first stop, and that stop was a big one. It back in 2003, and Department of Energy was a part of that, and I was so happy to hear that the agency just this year entered into a memorandum of agreement. Particularly excited because there is a echo in the air about opportunity zones, not just in this two-day discussion of which you're learning the A to Z's, but most of all the capacity building requirements to apply information. Information truly is powerful when you know what to do with it. So thank you both, Mary and Angela, for that presentation. And Angela, your time on this presentation has run out, but our time has not run out. We are a 5-year initiative, and so from this day forward and beyond, we will be working daily to make sure that more and more of those who were intended, who were called distressed, now can be connected and not disconnected from all the opportunities prevalent in these public policies. As my program shows, Mary, let's see if we take any questions from the audience as it relates to that you've just provided us.
So I thought Angela's remarks were very interesting and just underscored the importance of not limiting yourself as you're trying to think about the opportunity zone incentive and how to make it work for you. I really want to underscore that. And one of the questions that we get is, okay, well, I kind of understand there's this great incentive out there, but I don't really know how to maximize it or exploit it or use it for the benefit of my community. What should I be doing? There's a lot of things that a community should be doing. First of all, pulling together to make sure that all of the stakeholders in a community are working together and not working in opposite directions. And so that, again, I mentioned this a little bit in my presentation, but don't ignore all the stakeholders. All the movers and shakers in a community are the folks that should be involved in this. It takes a combination of business leaders and civic organizations and private foundations and tax-exempt entities, and the faith community is very powerful in this regard. and then also any, the states. I've worked with a couple of states, particularly the state of Maryland, because I'm located here in DC. So I work quite a bit with the state of Maryland, and they have been very proactive in trying to pull together state incentives and local incentives and the Oz incentive. The city of Houston is another great example. They put on a conference, I think it was last year, I've lost track of time now, but it was an all-day conference where everybody, and the mayor kicked it off, and it was just this fabulous all-day conference talking about how the different communities of Houston had pulled together their needs and possible sources of funding, and identifying, really targeting, this is what we need, and are there investors out there that want to invest in this. So all of that organization is extremely critical. And one of the things too that I try to emphasize is this is not a do-it-yourself project. If you have an opportunity zone, either you're sitting on it and you want somebody to come do something with it, or you have a project in mind, really, whether it's me, which I would love it to be, but whoever it is, get good counsel on this, because this is one of those situations where you can easily make a misstep early in the process and then suddenly find out, oh, my capital gains don't qualify because I waited too long, or I bought this property and I didn't cross the T's and dot all the I's. There's a lot of rules within the Oz incentive, rules and regulations, but they also provide a lot of flexibility. So you shouldn't be scared off by them, but you should just respect them, to trust good counsel to be able to say, well, this might be how you might want to structure things in order to maximize what you want to do, or have you thought about this, have you thought about that, just to help you think those things through, and to make sure that you don't make a misstep that's irrevocably going to taint your ability to benefit from the Oz incentive. The other thing I would say is that there's a lot of angst right now about what's going to happen with opportunity zones. We have an election coming up, in case anybody didn't know that, in a few days, and what's going to happen with opportunity zones and if there's a new administration. And I think that whether we continue to have a Trump administration or we have a Biden administration, Oz is not going away. Clearly, we know that the Trump administration is very gung-ho. President Trump has devoted a lot of resources to making the Oz incentive to be a success and to maximize its use. And of course, and he's already said he would like to expand it and improve it. Vice President Biden has also said in his platform, in his materials, his tax plan, that he's not going to do away with the opportunity zone incentive. He would be interested in modifying it to some extent to make sure that more of the investments are impact focused and more accountability and transparency. But that's really nothing that's not already under consideration. There's been bills introduced in the Congress, and some of the champions of opportunity zones in the Congress, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina and Cory Booker from New Jersey, who are the original champions of Oz in the Senate, are both very interested in information reporting and accountability and transparency, and trying to make the Oz incentive work even better to attract dollars to the communities where what the original policy was intended to do. So I would not worry about the rug being pulled out from me if Vice President Biden is elected. It's just going to be an opportunity to help shape what the Oz of tomorrow looks like, in terms of things that didn't get into the original bill for various reasons that now could be added to make the incentive even more powerful in achieving its intended policy.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's recorded here. You heard it first. Second, Oz of tomorrow is what works. How about that? Thank you so much for this moment in time, Mary. Great seeing you. See you along the way here.